there are a lot of things that I'm going to go through. I'll try to leave some time at the end. Things that we don't have time to get into as much detail as you would want, feel free to contact me. And I do have my email address all showed up there. I'm always happy to talk with people, to email things, and really it's based on what I have learned a lot from trial and error. Doing my MBA really did give me a good business background, and I did a lot of research on my own. I listened to a lot of podcasts and blog posts and on business freelancing, so I've gained a lot of knowledge and I love to share it with other people. So don't feel afraid to talk to me and ask me for more information. So today we're really going to focus on taxes and some law aspects for freelancers, and really those topics are huge. So I've kind of focused on some things that are really relevant to everybody, that are really important. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And I'll incorporate a little bit just freelancing in general, and I can go on for days and days on that. So we're just going to hit it a little bit. Okay, so can you all hear me when I'm not at the mic? Yeah, in the back? Okay, I think that'll be easier. I like to move around a little bit and I don't like to be at the mic. So we're going to start with contracts. Contracts are essential. If you're in the session that was in this room the previous hour, we talked a little bit about contracts. If you do anything, make a contract. It has saved me a lot. I've found that the times where I did have problems with people paying, almost every one of them was when I didn't have a contract. So I learned pretty quickly that if you have a contract, you're just starting out in a better situation. It's kind of the idea of why do we lock our doors at night? Not because I think that robbers are going to come every night and try to steal everything in my house, but it's that protection, it's the precaution, kind of putting yourself in a safer place. So have a contract. So things what to include in your contract. We want to have an indemnity clause. So that's basically just saying, hey, if there problems come up, issues, harm, it's not my fault. So it's just kind of keeping you safe. And most times in editing, I do editing and writing mainly, but with most things in publishing, there's not too much a risk of some huge harm that comes from the project you're working on. So you don't really need to worry about it too much. But it's just, again, safeguarding. We're locking the door at night so the robbers don't come in on that one time out of 1,000 that it might happen. We also want to specify when the client is going to give us the materials. That's so important. I have a lot of clients who have said, okay, I'm going to send you it on the beginning, the first of the month. And then it's the 15th, and I send them an email and say, hey, so you're going to send that file to me? And so put it in the contract saying, okay, if you submit your material on this day, then I will finish it on this day. But if you don't send the materials at that time, then we're going to have to move everything back. So it's just protecting yourself so they can't say, well, I'm giving you the materials and now you have to finish in 2 days. And I say, it's not possible. Also, that helps. With that is sometimes you can say, okay, well, this would be the cost at this time. But if they don't submit the materials on time, then the cost could change. I've actually had people who I've given a quote to, and then they contact me 2 to 3 years later and say, okay, I'm ready to work with you. And I say, that's great. We have to renegotiate the price because I'm not going to do it for that cost anymore. And so you can include that in your contract saying, this price is valid for the next 3 months. Just so you're kind of saving yourself so they can't come back later and say, well, you said it was going to be $100 and now it's $200. Why? And so another thing to think about. Due dates. So important. Just so you're on the same page when you're going to be returning things. Are you submitting it all at the same time, or are you going to do it okay, I'm going to send you chapters 1 through 5 on this day, chapters 6 through 10 on this day. Just again, being very clear so both sides know what the expectations are, and so there's not any miscommunication there and confusion, which could cause problems. So the contract really is just about putting all the details down so there isn't miscommunication, misunderstanding, and so you're both happy at the end of the day. Also, so another really important part is make sure you provide all the details of what you're going to do. So I say, for example, an editing project, I'm going to fix all spelling, all punctuation, all, if I'm doing a sub-edit, I'm going to look at organization, I'm going to look at the flow between sentences. So be very specific, again, so they know what to expect. So if there are any problems, you can say, well, the contract said I was going to do this, this, and this. I didn't do this thing. I can do it for you, but that would be an extra cost. Details of payment and the payment amount, again, make it very clear. Pretty common with freelancers is requiring 50% upfront. That's how much I require. I found that helps weed out some of the people who are. So if they're having to put down 50% upfront, they're serious. They're more likely to pay you the rest too. But if they don't pay you the rest, at least you got half of it, right? Some people do about a third upfront. I am hesitant to do that now because it's not weaning as many people out. And I've had experiences where if they say, well, I can't pay the 50% up front, and it just, based on my experience, it means maybe they're in a little more financial difficulty, which means they will probably be in financial difficulty when they're trying to pay me the rest. So I'm just trying to save myself issues coming when they need to pay and they say, I don't have money. Okay, so that's why I do 50% up front. People, I haven't had a problem with that. They're reasonable. They say, yeah, that makes sense. I need to show my commitment, but you're not requiring the whole amount up front. So it's kind of a good for both people. I'm pretty flexible in how they pay me. Basically, as long as they're giving me the money, I'm okay. So I would say be open to various payment options. Venmo works very well. PayPal, there is about a 4% transaction fee, so I avoid using PayPal for that. You can do direct deposit. That's so simple. I do take checks in the mail. I've also done Western Union. So, as long as it's a reliable method, go for it. I do include a late fee explanation in the contract saying if you don't pay within 30 days of the due date, then I will add a 1% transaction fee per 30 days late. And I used to do a higher one, but then I realized that in some states that's illegal. So you do want to make sure that whatever state you reside in, that it is legal, how much you're charging. But 1% seems to be very standard, so you're okay with that. Also, sometimes in projects you might decide or the client might decide that it's not working. And so I think it is beneficial to have a clause that says, okay, we can cancel, but it needs to, if we decide we're going to cancel the project, it needs to be, my contract says, I believe within 48 hours of the client signing the contract. Otherwise, there is a kill fee. So if I put in 25% of the project work, then they need to pay me for 25% of the project price. And again, these are things that are just saving me, and a lot of them I've implemented because I've had an experience where I was burned, and so I've learned. And so covering these things really does save you a lot. And I really just think that people when they're signing a contract, they feel like this is legitimate. So I actually need to follow through. Whereas if there isn't a contract, they say, she's just a person that I haven't actually ever met because I do things online with people around the world. And so I think it's a lot easier for people to justify like, well, I had a hard month, I don't have the money, so I'm just not going to pay. But when they sign the contract, they feel like, okay, I could be taken to court. So I better be serious about this. So if you do want to see a sample contract similar to the one that I use, that I've tailored to my needs, feel free to email me, or if you want to talk to me about anything else, feel free to email me. Yes, Caroline.
How do you personally calculate the fee? Sorry, I just saw that.
No, that's a good question. Kill fee would just basically be, so if I did 25% of the work, then they owe me 25% of the project fee. So it is prorated based on how much of the work I've completed. So it's in the contract, there isn't a, okay, kill fee is this dollar amount, it's percentage prorated that way. Question. Any other questions about any of, well, contracts, what to include, contracts in general? Oh, nice. Okay. Very good. Okay. With the contracts, I just email them because, like I said, I have some local clients, but most of them are all around the world, so I'm not seeing them. So I just do it by email. There's just a place in there that they can sign, and they return the email to me, and then I have it archived. I archive it in my email and also in the folder for that client. And it's so important, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but it's so important to archive, document everything. Keep all emails. With email, like Gmail, I mean, you can save an unimaginable amount of data, so there's no reason to delete anything that might be useful later, so just archive it all. And so it's really just easy for me in an email to say, okay, here's the signed contract, goes in my email, and if I ever need to pull it up again, it's right there. So make sure you're saving the contracts in all emails. Okay, we're good? Anything else? Okay, so that's the biggest legal item I think as freelancers we need to be thinking about first. Some other things that I've had people ask me about, liability insurance. In some industries, it really is valuable and important to have liability insurance to save you if something does happen. But like I mentioned before with the indemnity, in publishing, there really isn't usually that much risk. And so, I don't know any freelancers in the publishing industry who have liability insurance. If you talk to a lawyer, they're going to say do it. Because, you know, that's part of their livelihood. And some insurance brokers will say, yeah, it's really beneficial. I've listened to insurance brokers say that. But a lot of their reasoning, I don't feel is really applicable to me. So I've never had liability insurance. I've never had a problem where I thought, oh, I wish I had. Yes?
I think the only time you really, really need it is if like the things that you're editing could cause people to lose a lot of money, or they could cause them to make bad decisions.
Physical harm.
Yeah, so like if you're editing a book on how to safely, dive for sharks or something, like something that someone could get hurt, you might want it, but.
Right. Yeah. And then well, this is all in the court of law, but if you have that indemnity clause, then that's partly saving you, though a judge could decide otherwise, right? But most likely you're going to be okay. But yeah, very good point. So unless you could have a huge, really negative effect, you're going to be okay. So I don't think it's really worth it. Like I was saying before, document all conversations. I had one time where shortly after I started freelancing full full-time running my own business. I had a lady I did work for, and I did some more work for her, and she sent in some payments, and then things started to get a little shaky. So apparently a check got lost in the mail, and then she sent another check, but that one never came, and then she went radio silent, and I kept contacting her, and finally she comes back and says, oh, you know what, I was not satisfied with any of the work you did for me, I'm just not going to pay you. And I said, well, that's interesting, because I have all these emails that say, oh, thank you so much for your work, I really appreciate it, this was great, the check is in the mail, I've sent another one. So I'm saying, well, now you're saying this, but all these emails say this. So she worked with a lawyer, and I'm pretty sure the lawyer just said, you have no case, you need to pay her. And she did pay me. But if I hadn't had all those emails documented, I'm pretty sure I would have been out of luck. So document everything. Save. And with that, so have it in your email, have it on your computer, back up your computer, whether it's cloud storage, also external hard drive, USB. So make sure it's in several places so that if your computer blows up, which is not too drastic for me, I have really bad technology luck. So have a backup. So if you say, I just lost all my work that I spent the last 6 weeks on, I say, oh, thumb drive, Dropbox, I love you, you saved my life. Did you have something?
With that, I just keep a file in OneNote for all the projects I'm working on, and every time I have a phone conversation as well, I open up a thing and I will keep notes on what we're talking about, so I can, it's just, I lose things in my brain all the time.
Yeah.
But it's also helpful to say, you know what, I'm going back here, we had a phone conversation on September 3rd, and you mentioned these 3 points, and they'll, so even if it's not an email conversation, just having documentation, it's not necessarily legal proof, but when you can quote dates and names and specific things back, it at least sparks their memory or makes them think, oh, well, I guess I can't get away with whatever the thing is.
Yeah, and something I'll do with that, I avoid phone conversations with clients because of the documentation thing, but if I am talking with them on the phone, I'll say, so I'm going to send you an email after our phone call just to summarize everything we talked about. And then you do have that documentation that they saw, and that if they have problems with, they could have emailed back and said, actually, this isn't what I thought in an email. And so it really is helpful. You have that documentation, but it's also another opportunity just to make sure that you both are on the same page of what you're going to do going forward. So yeah, that's really, I think it is really important. Make sure you're taking notes during the phone conversations, because we all think, I'm going to remember that. I got some good brains up there. But then 30 minutes later, like, oh, what exactly? So make sure you're documenting it. Any questions about that? Yeah, Laura.
I just make a comment. If you're, say you're 2,000, you're going to be in small claims. So to get your money, you're going to have to pay $250. I never let it build up to $2,000. So I would say, I ask for half up front too, but after that, it's monthly. And if they're getting behind, I stop.
Yeah.
So I would say stop working if you're not getting paid.
Yeah, and that's exactly from that story I was telling you about. That was at the beginning, and so I was just trusting people. But now, yeah, you know, if they're missing that first payment, then you need to say, okay, wait a minute, let's talk about things, and doing more work and spending more of your time before you feel confident that you're going to get paid. Definitely a good point, thank you. With small claims court. Small claims court can be helpful, but here's the catch. Even if small claims court rules in your favor that your client does owe you the money, small claims court does not collect the money for you. You would still have to work with the collection agency, or you could legally get garnishment from their wages, but you still have work to do. So you might get the judge to say, yes, you do get the money, but you still have to collect it. So small claims court can be helpful, but don't just think, oh, well, if I come up with a problem, the small claims court is going to be good. I have the documentation, I'm set. It's still a long ride to get the money even after that. So I have, and with all my clients, I've worked with hundreds of people. There have only been maybe 5 that have really been problematic that I've had problems getting payment from. So most people will pay you. I wouldn't be too afraid of that. But I have, with a few people, said I will take you to small claims court, but I really have tried to work with them so that I didn't have to. And I haven't actually taken anybody to small claims court yet because it's your time, it's money, and you can require them to pay your court costs. But it's just a hassle, and you still have to find some way to actually collect the money. So I'd rather just find a way to collect the money from them without the small claims court. So that's just kind of being aware of small claims court. Whether to be a sole proprietor or have an LLC, be a C Corp, an S Corp. We'll go to details here. Okay, so sole proprietor is the easiest one. Basically, by default, if you're a freelancer, you're a sole proprietor. You don't have to do anything, file anything with the government. On your taxes, you just fill out a Schedule C, so it's nothing too out of the ordinary, so it's easy. The back, kind of the negatives is that if your business incurs liabilities beyond what your assets are, what you earned, then you are personally responsible for that money. So you have no protections, whereas if you file for an LLC, then you do have some protections that way. So there's that benefit there. With an LLC, how you do it, you file paperwork with the state. It's usually around $500, so it's a little bit, the outlay at the beginning, but then over time, it can be pay for itself, really. And you can file your taxes personally or as an LLC, and if you do it as an LLC, you can save money on taxes. So there's that benefit there. But there is more record keeping involved. You have to be really careful about showing that, okay, you're having these meetings with your corporation, you're doing these steps required of LLCs. So it's just a little bit more work. So you can kind of gauge, are you the kind of person who just needs it to be easy as possible and be willing to pay a little bit more in taxes, or are you somebody that is willing to put in the time and the organization required to have those benefits of having a corporation? Similar to an S Corp, you file the paperwork to be an LLC, and then you fill out a tax form to be considered an S Corp. So that's kind of the steps. An S Corp is just a step above an LLC for tax purposes. It's not a governmental, non-tax thing. And again, you can get some tax savings that way. If you're interested, I would recommend just talking with a tax professional and talking to them about your situation, what kind of work you're doing, how much you're earning for freelancing, and see what one really works best for your personal situation. Because it really depends on how much you're making as a freelancer, all these different things. So get some professional feedback so you can see which one is best for your situation. Any questions about that? Yes, Caroline.
And again, sorry if you said this, but do you recommend that freelancers do one of these?
Good question. So it really just depends on your situation, your working style, what works best for you. If you need it just to be as easy as possible, just go with sole proprietor and you're set. There's nothing wrong with that. If you are, I think especially if you're making more money, it can be very beneficial to be a C Corp or an S Corp. My tax preparer, she recommends it. I am involved in a few different business industries, ventures, and so I do have C Corp set up. It's been beneficial that way. but I really think it just depends on your personal situation. Yeah.
A follow-up question like that would be, is there a point when you, like you said, is it after making so much money for a certain point in time, how hard is it to move from sole proprietor into an LLC, or maybe as a starting freelancer, go sole proprietor, and then at a certain point you want to consider going up to a different?
Yeah, I would especially suggest if you're just starting in freelancing, and especially if you're still working full-time somewhere else, just start as a sole proprietor. You're good that way. But if you are becoming more serious about freelancing, if you are doing it more full-time, then that's when you would want to start to see, okay, is it more beneficial for me? How much you're making, earning a year from it. Yeah. There's something I was going to say about that, but I don't remember what it was. Yes.
So, show my ignorance a little bit here. Sole proprietor, like, do you have to do for that, or like just when you start, suddenly you decide, I'm gonna do a freelance project, you're like sole proprietor?
It's just by default, really.
Okay.
So basically, it's just on your tax forms. You have to fill out the form that says you brought in self-employment income, and that you didn't just get W-9s or W-2s from employment. Yeah, so it's just by default. So it's easy because you don't have to do anything. It's just when you get to tax time, then you say, okay, I brought in this extra income that's not recognized on a tax form. Yes.
Isn't there a certain money amount where you have to ask the client to send you a tax? What's that?
Yeah, so that's a 1099 form, and I believe it's $600. It might have changed a little bit.
No, it's
$600.
Okay, yeah. So if you receive more than $600 or 600 or more from a client, then they are required to send you a 1099 form. And so you would report that on your taxes just as you would report like a W-2.
And I've only had clients who were like companies that paid me over that amount that needed to send me that. Do you have clients who are individuals that are just hiring you to work on their novel? So do you have to give them some kind of instruction on how to do that? Do you send them a link and say like, download this file and fill it out? I mean, I have not had an individual person pay me more than that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So you do need to do some education, and it's probably on a different screen. So IRS.gov really has some beneficial information. So when I think of the government, I don't think of helpful information, but IRS.gov it's pretty clear. So when you have questions, I would actually go there, and they have a lot of pages that just explain, this is what this term means, this is what self-employment tax is, this is when you need to pay it. So it's pretty straightforward, so you can send people to those sites and give them a little information there. If they don't send you a 1099, then you just still report it on your Schedule C, or like on your self-employment tax form. So you're still, if they don't follow through, you're still required to report the income that you got. Yes.
Another thing is if you live in an incorporated city, you really need a business license. And so that goes along with any of the three, but especially the sole proprietor.
Right, thank you, yes. And so you need to find out in the area that you're living, what are the requirements for having a business? And so do make sure you're doing that so you're legal as well. Any other questions relate to that? Right. So taxes, we kind of already mentioned it, and I was tempted to have just a picture of somebody like feeling hopeless, because I think that's how most of us feel when tax time comes. Like I said, IRS.gov really does contain helpful information, so check it out. And there's a lot of information that you can get online. Before I started my freelance business, I listened to a lot of YouTube videos from accountants, tax preparers, just giving some tips so I understood the basics, had a good handle on that. And then you can, on specific topics, then you can Google those and get more information. I really think it's helpful to work with the tax preparer. I tried to do my taxes my first year of freelancing, and I thought I did okay until the IRS sent me a letter saying, oh, you made a mistake. And so, you know, it wasn't a big deal. I just had to pay the amount that I made this mistake on, and life was fine. I wasn't in jail or anything. But I've learned that it's just a lot easier. If your taxes are really simple, you just have a full-time job and they send you a W-2 and you report that and that's good, then you probably could do it on your own. But especially when you're doing freelance work and you can take deductions and there's so many other things going on, especially if you're going to be a C Corp or an S Corp, work with a tax preparer. It's worth it. They're not that expensive, and the amount you spend on the tax preparation, you can deduct it from next year's taxes. Well, it's a deduction, so it's not a straight dollar for dollar, but it's definitely worth it. So work with them on the details. So some suggestions to help you be in a good place for tax time, and tax time is more often for freelancers, and we'll talk about that, is to save all receipts related to any business expenses. So important, because if the IRS did audit you, you would need to show, okay, yeah, this was legitimate. I didn't just pull it out of the air. I did spend this much money on a laptop. And for me, it would be like, yes, I bought a laptop this year, and I bought one last year, and the year before. But if I have the receipts, then I'm good. So there are some awesome apps, Shoebox and Wave are just two examples, where you take a picture with your phone, and then it scans the image of the receipt, and then it uploads it into your little system, and Wave will even like tally all of the different categories. So really taking the effort out of it for you, and it just helps you stay organized. I used to have like a manila folder where I filed different receipts, but you know, good intentions and things just don't work out as well. So I would really recommend finding an app for you that works. And then also in my email, if any online purchases I make for the company, I will file them in that one folder. This is a little unrelated, but any donations, so charitable donations, go in a folder in my email, online ones. And so at tax time, I just pull out from here and pull out from there, and I know what my expenses were, what my donations were, and so it makes it a lot easier for pulling all my expenses together for taxes. So make sure you're saving all expenses related to your freelancing. And we'll talk about some relevant ones in a minute. Don't wait until April to do it. Don't wait until March. Be doing it all year. As big of a task when it comes to when you need to file taxes. And so just kind of organizing beyond your receipts. There are lots of programs that you can use to track your income, your outgo, everything related to your business. I actually just use an Excel spreadsheet. It works really well for me. It is like the most basic, and I almost feel embarrassed saying that I do that, but it works. So you can do something really simple, or you can do something more automated, but make sure you're just tracking how much did you earn this month from freelancing. How much did you spend? So just track all that stuff so that you can pull it together when it comes tax time, and it's a lot easier, less stressful. Questions related to that? Okay. So deductions. Deductions are great. It helps make you feel a little bit better that you're paying so much in taxes, because you can take deductions. So accounting fees, any advertising. So advertising, that includes if you put ads in an online magazine, but also includes business cards. So get not creative as in dishonest, but get creative in what things are you spending money on related to your business. And really think about it in that aspect, because you'll probably realize, oh, well, I spent this and this was related. So this conference, this is publishing, you're related to your career. So this is a deduction that you can take, the money that you spent for registering for this conference. Banking fees if you have them, health insurance. So if you're paying for private insurance, you don't have it through an employer, you get to use that as a deduction, which is nice. Any kinds of business equipment, materials, programs. So for example, I have the Adobe Suite. It's kind of expensive, but thank goodness I get to take that as a deduction. Your home office, if you have an office that's set aside for, then you can use that as a deduction. If it's just like, well, I sit on the couch, so I'm using my laptop, that doesn't cut it. IRS is going to say no. So you do need to have it set aside as your working area. Yes?
I was just gonna say, like, how strict do you start to get with like office area? Like if we have a computer room and we have our own home printer that you use for business printing as well as personal printing, would you count that, or do you start trying to draw the line and say like, let's say, there's a printer for your work thing?
So the IRS says, we realize you're probably not going to use it 100% for your business, but it needs to be mostly. And so that's one of the questions that I would say, talk with your tax preparer and say, well, I'm using it this percentage. And there's another way that the IRS has set up that you can kind of just take a percentage of your whole house and a percentage of the utilities, and percentage of your internet service, cell phone, anything that you use for your business, and you can just take that percentage as a deduction. So, that's a really good question. That one, talk with them. So like I mentioned, phone, internet, utilities. So anything, if you have a home office and you're working there, then anything that you're using in your home, really part of it can be deducted. So again, you would just need to say, okay, this month my utilities was this much. March it was this much. May, so you just have to keep all those things. So you can pull that out tax time. Business trips, meals, usually in publishing we're not doing so many of those. But they can be deducted. So I was going to go probably about a year ago. I was going to fly out to Calgary and do some presentations at a university there. And that I could have deducted my airplane ticket, meals there. I was going to stay with my sister, so I wouldn't have needed hotel expenses. But if I had stayed at a hotel, it would have been all deductible. Okay. It does need to be business related. And you can mix vacation with business, but you can only say, okay, well, this was the business part, and then these other days that were not business related, you can't deduct those nights in the hotel, that kind of thing. So, it's just being honest, what was really business and what was play. Yes?
Did you count like conferences like this as a deduction?
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
And professional memberships?
Yeah, so membership to LDSPPA is tax deductible. So nice, right? Another reason to be members. Okay. So self-employment tax. This is like the dark side of freelancing. It's the part that I really don't like, but it's just what it is. So in addition to paying regular income tax, as everybody does, as freelancers you get to pay an extra tax, which is self-employment tax. And it's what basically the tax that your employer would be paying otherwise. So it's like Social Security and some other taxes like that. So for 2016, most people, it's 15.3%. If you're making over the threshold, then the percentages for some of the taxes in self-employment, they change a little bit. But for most people, it's going to be 15.3%. So it's a good chunk, and you just need to be aware of it. So you're saving, preparing that you're going to be spending some of your money that you make as a freelancer on self-employment tax. Kind of the silver lining is that 50% of the self-employment tax can be used as a deduction. And to estimate how much that'll be is, and I just use this as an example, nice round numbers makes it easy. So if you're making 100K a year, then you use the multiplier 0.9235, and that will give you this number, and then you take that multiplier, and then you do the 15.3%. And so that will tell you, okay, $14,130 is what I'm going to need to pay in self-employment. And so as I'm making money during the year, I'm saving, saying, okay, each month I need to be saving XX dollars to pay for taxes. So it's something you need to be aware of. It's not like, oh, free money that I'm making as a freelancer. But it's like, well, I made $100, but then I have to pay income tax and I have self-employment tax. So I'm actually not making $100. I'm only making $70. Okay. So be aware of it. And that's really the breakdown on how you can figure out how much you're going to be making. And so you could do the same thing on every project. Okay, so I just earned $100, and so this much is going to be like $14 is going to be going towards self-employment tax. Okay, last thing, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to go through it quick. Quarterly taxes. If you are making enough money, you're going to need to pay quarterly taxes. Basically, if your tax liability, if you would need to pay the IRS on April 15th, $1,000 or more, you're going to need to pay taxes quarterly instead of just on April 15th. The only exception is if your withholdings are expected to cover 90% of that, then you don't need to. So if you're just doing a little freelancing on the side and you have a full-time job, or your spouse has a full-time job and they're having taxes withheld for their paychecks, you might be okay. But if you are making a little bit more money as a freelancer, you're probably going to have a bigger liability. And so be aware of that. Again, talk with a tax preparer, figure out, okay, how much are we having taken out in taxes every year? How much am I making? What is the tax liability? What would I need to pay at April 15th? And then from there, figure out, okay, do I need to pay quarterly taxes? What if you don't pay quarterly taxes? Well, the IRS will say, come April 15th, oh, you owe $2,000. So we're not just going to make you pay $2,000, but we're going to make you pay an interest rate because you didn't pay us quarterly. So it's kind of like salt in the wound, right? You have to pay taxes, and now you have to pay a late fee. So that's what happens if you don't pay the quarterly taxes, and you should be. So how do you figure it out? Just base it kind of on last year's. If you think that's about the same amount that you're going to make this year. If it's a big difference, then consider that in your calculations. But so if in 2015 your tax liability was $15,000, or your tax was $15,000 and $11,000 was withheld, then your liability would be $4,000. So if you had a $4,000 liability, then you would want to pay quarterly taxes because it's over the $1,000 and it's less than the 90% that was withheld. Okay, so from there it's pretty easy. If you estimate that you're going to owe $4,000, then just divide it by 4, and so each quarter you would need to pay the IRS $20,000. Paying is pretty easy. Again, you can go on irs.gov and they'll tell you how to do it. You can do it electronically. You can do it by check. Surprisingly, they make it pretty easy for you to give them money, right? So the payment due dates in April, which we're used to, right? But June, September, and then the following January. So when you're paying taxes for 2016, the last payment for 2016 would be in January 2017. So it's a good thing to add that to your Outlook calendar or whatever calendar you're using, so you have the reminder, pay your taxes, so you don't have any problems with that. It's one of those not fun things, but it's just reality of being a freelancer. So there are so many, in my opinion, so many great things about freelancing, so there has to be some kind of downside, right? And that's what it is. Questions about that? I know we went through really fast. I think that, yeah. Any questions in general? Anything we talked about or that we didn't talk about and you're really wanting to know? Yeah, Callie.
I don't know if I formulated my question yet, but say for this liability quarterly tax thing, if you are, like you don't have a steady or stable income, like for the first quarter, maybe I don't have any income because I'm working on it because I'm really busy with other stuff. Then the second quarter, I have someone who's paying me a high hourly rate or whatever. How does that work with my quarterly taxes? Am I paying based on just the whole year in total, or is it like the first quarter with anything because I'm drinking? Does that make sense?
Yeah, good question. So if you have a good idea, saying that you know that there's a lot of ups and downs, but overall, you know that the year, you're pretty sure how much you're going to make, you can do it two ways. You can either divide it evenly with the 4 quarters, but if you're not making much money that first quarter, you might not want to do that, right? So you can pay more in maybe that next quarter when you did make more money. So they're not as much about if you're paying even amounts as if you're paying enough that over that year you paid what you needed to pay. So yeah, that's a really good question. You do have either option, and you especially you can show, hey, well, I didn't make any money until this last quarter, so that's why I paid it on the last quarter.
And then if you overpay, right, then that just, when you file in April, then that's when you get a return on what you paid if you paid too much.
Yeah. So if you do pay too much, then they give the money. Yes.
This question's on the other side of the coin. We're on our second book and the editor quit because she retired. So I'm looking for a new editor. So if anybody wants to put their name on this piece of paper for a nonfiction book on adversity, we'd love to consider you.
Great, thank you. Our audience will appreciate that.
Piece of paper.
Okay, we are out of time, but like I said, feel free to come talk to me, email me. I'm happy to share more information. Okay, thank you very much.